Hey everybody, Josh Collacchi here with RotoCurve, and it's week 2 in the NFL. Time to get those lineups set for FanDuel, and of course you've looked at quarterbacks, you've looked at running backs, but what's next is wide receivers. You need the most of those. You need 3 of them on FanDuel, and you could argue that they're the most important part of your daily fantasy lineup. So let's get into some guys that we like for week 2. First guy I wanted to discuss is my top tier option. There's only one guy that I really think we should pay for this week, and that's Julio Jones for the Atlanta Falcons. Last week against the Eagles, Julio Jones looked like the best player on the planet, honestly. I mean, you saw him running crossing routes against Byron Maxwell, running away from him. You saw him taking screens into the end zone for touchdown. And he really just looked like that player that the Falcons traded 2 first-round picks for. And it's really incredible to see. Now, at the end of that game, he did suffer a little bit of a hamstring injury. He didn't really necessarily have to leave the game. He would just missed a series or 2, but it's something to keep an eye on as an active approach. But I expect him to play in week 2 against the New York Giants, and he had a really good matchup against those 2. Last week, the Giants allowed Tony Romo to throw for 356 yards and 3 touchdowns. Most of that without Dez Bryant, who suffered a foot injury that's likely to keep him out for probably close to 2 months. So it's one thing to take a look at, considering the fact that the Giants allowed a receiving core of Terrence Williams, Cole Beasley, and Devin Street to catch over or to receive over 300 yards. Of course, a guy like Jason Witten was there as well. But a guy like Romo is a little bit better than a guy like Eli Manning, or a guy like Matt Ryan, who's going to be throwing the ball to Julio Jones. But it just tells you the fact that secondary really struggles. Their 2 corners in Prince Amukamara and Dominique Rodgers-Cromartie really struggle against physical receivers like Julio Jones. And if they can jam him at the line, he's one of the fastest receivers in the NFL as well. So he has a great matchup. He has a great matchup almost every week, but especially this week, an NFC East matchup that has a very high over-under. If you didn't want to necessarily pay for a top-tier receiver like Julio, there are some cheaper options. And my second-tier option is a guy that's also in the NFC East, and Jordan Matthews. Despite dropping the pass that probably sealed the loss for the Eagles last week, and he also had a touchdown that was taken away from him. If that play was reviewed, he would have had a touchdown pass from Sam Bradford in the 4th quarter. But despite those 2 things, he still caught 10 passes for over 100 yards. He had over 20 fantasy points on FanDuel. And he showed that he's going to be a volume catcher this year out of the slot for the Eagles. And with Sam Bradford throwing over 50 passes, we're going to see a lot of passes towards Matthews' way this season. So for week 2 against a team like the Dallas Cowboys, I really think he makes for a very good option. And I think he's a little bit cheaper than what his value should be expected to return, simply because he is the top option in that offense. Now, normally I would be concerned as a receiver going against the Cowboys slot cornerback in Orlando Scandrick, but he's hurt. He's out for the season. That's a big loss for a team like that. So expect Matthews to see a ton of mismatches up the middle, and he saw a lot of snaps in the slot, and that's just one place where he seems to be very good. He caught a lot of screens, a lot of passes up the middle. And with the way the Eagles offense looked in week 1 in terms of spreading the ball around but keeping the ball inside 10 yards, Matthews is going to see a lot of catches, and that's huge for cash games. And he has the height and the speed and the factor to catch the ball in the end zone as well. So he has some upside and a good matchup too. Now, the 3rd-tier receiver I want to discuss is Eric Decker. Decker caught a touchdown pass last week, as did his teammate Brandon Marshall. But for this week, I want to look at the cornerback he's going to be matching up against. Of course, he plays for the Jets, so the number 1 receiver is Brandon Marshall, and they face the Colts. So Vontae Davis is going to be covering Marshall, which, of course, we all know Vontae Davis is one of the top cornerbacks in the NFL. You never want to take a receiver going against him because he's really that good. He can lock anybody down. But Decker is going to be on the other side, and that makes him basically de facto the number 1 receiver for the Jets because Marshall is probably not going to see many targets. The guy that Eric Decker is going to be going up against, Darius Butler, who is a really small 5'10". What I mean by that is he's listed at 5'10", 185, but he's a bit smaller than that, and he even plays even smaller. So a guy like Decker has 4 or 5 inches on him, probably 30 or 40 pounds, and it just shows him that makes him a little bit of a better option to really exploit a mismatch against that secondary, and expect Ryan Fitzpatrick to look his way a lot with Brandon Marshall being matched up with Vontae Davis. The last tier 3 receiver I want to discuss is actually in that same game, and I actually like him for similar reasons as Eric Decker, and that's Dante Moncrief, second-year receiver out of Mississippi. Moncrief plays for the Indianapolis Colts now, and he's just $6,000 on FanDuel. Now, the one thing about teams going against the New York Jets, Darrelle Revis is there. But with T.Y. Hilton likely out, Andre Johnson's probably going to be the X-receiver or the guy that's the number one player for that receiving core. So he will likely be shadowed by Darrelle Revis. That means the guy on the other side is going to be Dante Moncrief, and he's going to have an excellent matchup because that other number one corner for the Jets, Antonio Cromartie, is probably going to be out this week. So we're going to see Dante Moncrief matching up with either Darren Walls, who was one of the top cornerbacks to target in terms of matchups last year, or Buster Skrine, who is a slot cornerback that's listed, I believe, at 5'8" or 5'9". So a guy like Moncrief that has the size, has the speed to get down the field, has an excellent matchup, and at his price of just $6,000, you could see a lot of targets, and especially some targets in the red zone. And if he can score a touchdown, he's going to match at least 2 times the salary right away, and that's huge on FanDuel. That wraps up our wide receiver segment for week 2 on FanDuel, and be sure to check out all the rest of the tools on RotoCurve. You can look at the rest of these videos that we do each week, and be sure to use everything to your advantage to hopefully make week 2 a profitable one in NFL. Good luck, everybody.